The main strategy at the moment is for simply to survive the initial bombardment. Now, the question is who has more stamina at this stage, and how long the US and its allies can maintain this sort of pressure. The longer the pressure goes on, I suspect you'll see more and more rifts within the system. And as I said, you're already seeing some dissenting voices from inside.
It's been reported that a new supreme leader has been chosen in Iran, which would make him the third following Ruhollah Khomeini and Ali Khamenei. Let's bring in Professor Ali Ansari, Professor of Iranian History and the Director of the Institute for Iranian Affairs at the University of St Andrews. Hello to you.
Good morning.
At this stage, how relevant or how important is it that a new supreme leader has been chosen?
I think it's important for the regime itself to reassure itself, shall we say, that there is continuity and that the systems are all working. The question, I think, for everyone is who they choose. And there have been some commentary, even from inside the country, that they need to find someone with a little bit more flexibility and a little bit more amenability to talking to the outside world. And all the indications are at the moment that that may not be the case. So we have to wait and see.
Donald Trump has already said that he should be consulted on this, and he's described Khamenei's son, who was the front runner for this post, as a lightweight.
He has indeed. I think Trump also may have been really talking about longer term consideration of who might be leading Iran. But he's mentioned, obviously, Mujtaba as a lightweight. And someone commented this morning that the new leader had been chosen and his name had been mentioned by Trump. So that is why some people are suggesting that they have, in fact, chosen Khamenei's son, which would mean that the hereditary principle is alive and well in Iran.
How secure do you feel the present power structure is in Iran at this moment?
I don't think it's as secure as people think it is. There's a lot of jumping to conclusions here, really, about how solid and deep and so on and so forth that it is. I fail to see how any regime, actually, however well entrenched it may be, can come out of this sort of type of bombardment in good shape. I think it will, at the very least, be crippled going forward. But indeed, there may be other challenges coming towards it in the not so distant future.
Tactically, it seems that the aggressors in this case were hoping that there could be some kind of split in in Iran's security forces. Is there any sign of that?
There are indications of things going on. It's obviously early days yet, but there are indications that there are disagreements, certainly. Now, disagreements doesn't mean defection, but I think, again, it's early days. People should remember that even in both sort of the Gulf Wars, be it 91 and 2003, the bombardment that preceded anything else, took several weeks. So we are early days at the moment, and the regime has banked on the fact that it will survive. The main strategy at the moment is for simply to survive the initial bombardment. Now, the question is who has more stamina at this stage, and how long the US and its allies can maintain this sort of pressure. The longer the pressure goes on, I suspect you'll see more and more rifts within the system. And as I said, you're already seeing some dissenting voices from inside.
And it doesn't matter that there is now clearly a very different emphasis in war aims between the United States and Israel. Israel really focusing on the military capacity, the weapons capacity of Iran and disarming it, whereas the Americans seem to have broader political aims.
I think there is a broader issue there. I think, as you quite rightly sort of raise, about what the ultimate political objective is, and in some ways, it's one could say that it's sensible for them to remain quite vague, so you're not hostage to fortune if it doesn't quite work out as you want. But be that as it may, I think you're quite right to highlight the fact that there's an issue here, certainly in terms of messaging to the Iranians themselves. I think if Trump was very clear about A, the territorial sovereignty of the country, and B, the fact that they're looking towards some sort of regime, let's say transition rather than change, just to give ourselves a little bit more room for maneuver in that sense, then I think people would be a bit more confident about what the end game might be. A lot of people in Iran are very anxious that Trump is simply going to turncoat and go and leave the situation as it is, or not actually cripple the regime apparatus as he sort of promised.
So far in this war, is it similar to the Ukraine conflict in as much as we are seeing new tactics and new types of weapon emerging, or is it, a more conventional air bombardment?
It's interesting. I'm probably not the best person to ask about that, to be honest, but it certainly seems to be that the Americans are seeking to use as broad a range of their sort of their capacities as they can on Iran, which is obviously not good news for Iran as a whole. I think in terms of the Iranian strategy seems to have been a lot more eclectic than people realize. I think even some within their own system have realized. I mean, we noticed that the president apologized for attacking the Arab neighbors before actually he was effectively countermanded by others who continue to do it. It's the range of the attacks and the way they've all gone to attack economic infrastructure fairly early on, actually, as far as the Iranians are concerned. That's probably shocked a few people or surprised a few people, I think, at the end of the day. But it's not it's not an unusual tactic, certainly, or it's not an unusual sort of approach in terms of conventional warfare.
What about geopolitics? What do you make of those scholars and observers who've been saying that for the United States, this is really all about the pivot to the Pacific and putting pressure on China because of China's growing alliance with Iran, and indeed its the large amount of energy that it's acquiring from Iran?
I think there's something to it, that actually what the Americans have been doing, even if you look at Venezuela, is to basically serve notice to the Chinese that they're not going to be effectively constrained, shall we say, by certain rules and orders that people assume they will always be constrained by, and B, that they have the capacity to do damage if they so choose to do it. I think the Russians and the Chinese in particular have always felt that the West has had its hands tied behind its back as far as its ability to do anything, because of the what we call the international rules-based order, which seems to have sort of obviously collapsed over the last 20 years. But it's I think certainly there's a message being sent to the broader, as you say, both the Russians and the Chinese.
So, I mean, from a Western perspective, that could be one benefit of this conflict.
I think in the longer term, very possibly. I mean, when I talk to a number of colleagues of mine, ex-military mainly, but others, I mean, there is this sort of view that there is some, there can be some longer term strategic benefit of basically serving notice to the Chinese and the Russians that the West isn't going to sit back and just and just be constrained and sort of hindered by its ability to do anything by various rules that they themselves don't really follow. I mean, I know the Chinese are obviously trying to present themselves as extremely rigorous in terms of the rules-based order, but it's not entirely true. So it's and as for the Russians, of course, they break it regularly. And then as for the Iranians, by the way, I mean, I know the Iranians want to say that. I saw an interview earlier today saying how peace-loving they were. I mean, it's simply not true. They've broken almost every rule since 1979, from the seizing U.S. embassies and attacking other embassies and so on and so forth. So there is an element here where the Trump administration and the Americans in general, by the way, are saying that if we're going to have a rules-based order, everyone has to play by the rules.
Professor Ali Ansari, thank you very much indeed for joining us.